night may be long and the dark may be deep, but the answers are there to be found. Whether it's the normal, the abnormal, or the paranormal, you're in the right place. Let's go beyond reality.
Welcome to the program. We've got a good one. We always do, actually. Tonight's no exception. Tonight we're going to be talking to Lisa Campion. She's a returning guest, actually, and we're going to talk about energy vampires. You know how sometimes you just can't explain why you feel completely drained? Some people describe it as like a truck has hit you. You know, you feel like that truck has hit you feeling. Or maybe you walk into a room and you suddenly feel drained or completely sapped of energy, or even it can be in the form of motivation is taken from you. Well, energy vampires might be to blame. And that's what Lisa's going to talk about tonight. Looking forward to this with Lisa. She's been on the program before, and we had a great conversation. We're going to pick up where we left off. A lot of people are feeling this way. Who are these energy vampires? How do we identify them? Maybe you yourself are one and don't even know it. One more time, remember the YouTube channel. If you have not found it and haven't subscribed, you should. Go to YouTube, search for JV Johnson, and when you find that, you'll see the subscribe button. Just subscribe. There's no fee or anything. But we have about 500 back episodes on the YouTube channel, plus some bonus content. And if you click the notification icon, you'll get alerted every time we go live with a stream or we upload new content. It's a great way to be part of our online community. It's also where our stream chat room exists. It's through the YouTube channel. The other thing you need to do is find the podcast. The podcast is available on all distribution platforms, at least the major ones, like Apple Podcasts, Google Podcast, whatever it's called, Stitcher, Spotify, TuneIn, other places. Subscribe to the podcast, too. It allows you to have it downloaded right to your smart device without even worrying about it. And if you miss a show, then you can just check it out. It's right there for you. You can listen to it. And, of course, Twitch channel is up and running, and it's very active. Good to see so many folks in both Twitch and the YouTube channel. So thanks for doing that. Remember, the Twitch channel will become our weekend platform. What else do I need to talk about before we go? And I don't think I have anything else that we've got to go over, so we can get started. I'm going to take a break, and we'll get Lisa Campion on with us, and we'll begin our discussion. Tonight we're talking about energy vampires with Lisa Campion. It's Beyond Reality. Don't go away. Please support the program. Go to patreon.com/Johaw. That's Johaw. I'm going to officially call these days Hairmageddon. My hair is so long, and I can't get it cut, obviously, for obvious reasons. And it's now just hanging down in my face. I can't see the chat very well. I can't see my notes very well. Add to that the fact that I've changed the lighting scheme in the studio. So it's basically the new lighting scheme is no lighting scheme. So I can't see anything because of that as well. I've got to rethink some things. But thankfully, we've got a great guest tonight, a returning guest. In fact, Lisa Campion is a psychic counselor and a Reiki master teacher. We're going to be talking about energy vampires, among other things tonight. Lisa, welcome back to the program. It's great to have you here.
Oh, thanks, JV. I'm so glad to be back.
Yeah, it's been a while. I'm trying to remember when you were on last. About a year, maybe?
Yeah, it was about a year ago. Yeah, it was right after my book came out.
Now, I have to ask you, just because it's the news of the day, every day for everybody, but how are things in your neck of the woods? You're near Boston, right? Boston was kind of hit pretty hard with this.
Yeah, the Boston area, just outside Boston. We got kind of wailed on here. Like that, it was pretty heavy in Massachusetts, and lots of people died. It was pretty serious. The hospitals it was one of those bad hot spots.
Yeah, New York City was as well. We in upstate New York, we were fairly unscathed, thankfully. Someone was just telling me today, actually, that I don't know who, if he did or a friend of his or whatever, went to make some hotel reservations down in North Carolina, and they will not take hotel guests from New York, Massachusetts, Connecticut, or New Jersey. And I'm not sure, there might be some other locations in there as well, but that's the strangest thing I've ever heard.
Yeah, I'm not sure that's. Is that fair?
I don't know if it's fair. I don't know if it's legal. I don't know.
I don't know.
There's so many things that fall into that. I don't know if this is legal category these days. It's just bizarre. But anyway, that's not what we're going to talk about. Although I would have to say that what's going on in the world around us and these things that we are kind of avoiding to talk about because we've heard so much about them might be affecting some of the things that we are going to talk about tonight. Would you say that's true?
Absolutely. I think this is a very tough time for psychics and sensitives. It's there's so much static in the collective consciousness. There's so much anxiety and fear and angst, and highly sensitive people can really tap into not only the energy that's going on in our life, but this kind of global energy. If you think about it, it might be the only time in history that the entire planet is freaked out at the same time.
That's a good point. Yeah.
And if you're sensitive, if you're like an empathy, psychic sensitive person, that's just like a massive energy whammy from the entire world, all at once. And the people I know who are sensitive are really like getting crushed by that. Just
what happens when there's so much angst among people in general, but particularly when it's at the scale that it is right now, and as you said, it's global? What happens to people like yourself who feel that energy? Is it painful? How does that work?
It's pretty painful, like it can feel like, if you're an empath, you're picking up the emotions that other people are feeling, so it can feel like sort of crushing depression or anxiety, really, incredible grief, and it's like your own grief and your own sadness because we're all freaked out, but then it feels like this extra weight, this extra heaviness that you don't know why you feel worse than other people do. And I think it's important, if you are sensitive and an empath, to learn how to clear that extra energy out, how to, get grounded. Like, if you think about sensitives and empaths being like the psychic sponges of the world, we have to like squeeze the sponge so we're not carrying around. I mean, it's bad enough having our own pain and angst, but the pain and angst of the entire world is just really too much.
Do you have a way that you can cleanse yourself of it? I mean, as it accumulates within you, is there a process that you go through that allows you to get some of it out of your system?
Yeah, there's a lot of things that I think, you can do, and that different things work for different people. I think being in nature is very important. Having your bare feet on the ground can connect us back with the earth energy. Taking a salt tub or using salt in their shower, that combination of salt and water, or getting in the ocean if you can, is very clearing for people. And I just do a very simple, like, breathing meditation of, like, breathing into my heart and my belly and, like, releasing any energy I'm holding down my feet and into the earth. And these days I have to do it, like, 5 or 6 times a day. I'll start feeling funky, and if I do that, I'm like, okay, now I can feel like myself again. Worse if I look at the news or, talk to somebody that's upset.
Yeah. Tell me about how this started for you. Most people I talk with that have these types of sensitivities were born with them, and it takes them a while to understand what's happening. What's your story?
Same. Yeah, definitely born with it. And, I was born, like, I grew up in the 60s and 70s outside Boston, back before there were psychics on TV and, paranormal shows on TV. There were no New Age bookstores. There was, like, I had to be quiet about it because, if you said you saw angels and talked to dead people, they put you in the mental hospital, So I really had to learn the hard way, like, trying to pretend to be normal in public, and in the meantime I was seeing beautiful things like angels, seeing maybe not so great things, seeing colors around people, just having all these experiences that other people didn't seem to be having. And I had some fortunate growing up. My parents were hippies, so they did things like take me to transcendental meditation when I was 10 years old. I mean, who gets to do that? But that's what you do when you're a hippie in 1974, So I learned how to meditate when I was young, and I got a lot of my psychic education by watching horror movies, especially paranormal ones,
Ooh.
I loved it. I was like 10 years old or something, 12 years old, and I snuck in to see the movie Poltergeist because my parents wouldn't let me go. And I went with a friend of mine, and that was the first time they have it on TV or on the movie, a psychic. I'm like, oh, my God, is that something you can do? Like, that's a thing? It was the first time I heard of that. And then she just spends this little, 5 minutes, describing what happens when you die and why some people get stuck. And I remember sitting in the movie theater with my jaw open, like, oh, my God, thank you, somebody, for explaining to me, what's going on here. And that sort of created, a lifelong love of horror movies for me. I still quite like them. But I got a pretty kind of a decent education, spiritual education from them. Some of the stuff I learned was good. And, it just took me a while to study and learn. I spent the first 20 years trying to figure out how to turn it off.
Yeah.
And then I was in college in the 80s, and it was the dawn of the New Age, and suddenly there were teachers, there were books, there were stores, and I got some really great training, and now I feel very passionately about helping other people not have to learn the hard way like I did. And I think people are more psychic than ever. I think right now people's psychic gifts are opening like crazy. So many people are having sudden psychic openings. I think every generation is more open than the last one. So the teens and the kids that I see now are like so much more open, psychic sensitive than I ever was. So it's exciting for me to be a teacher and train people how to really maximize their gift.
Do you think there's a global or I don't know how to a humanity-wide transcendence going on? Some kind of lifting of us all in a spiritual or psychic sense? Do you think that's happening worldwide?
Yeah, JV, I never really believed that whole thing about the shift and the ascension. I'm like, that's a lot of New Age gobbledygook, and I'm not much of a New Ager considering the fact that I'm a psychic. But, a couple of years ago, I just really started seeing this trend of people's gifts awakening, people's consciousness shifting, people becoming more psychic, becoming more sensitive, becoming very interested in their, awakening spiritually. And at this point, I just, from the empirical evidence that I have and the observational evidence that I have, I really just have to believe that it's true. And it's pretty exciting, to think that and even what's going on now with the virus, to think about how it's making us rethink our lives or reshape our priorities or really, come up into our hearts in a different way than maybe we've ever done. That's pretty exciting. Yeah,
I just want to mention something. We've got some questions scrolling through our chat room, and I'm going to get to those questions about energy vampires and how people affect you when they drain your energy. We're going to get to that, so be patient in the chat room. But there's some other things I want to cover first with Lisa. When you started to recognize what was going on with you, and it wasn't as scary as it first was because you started to understand it, did you make any connection to any spiritual source for this, or did you find it more of a innate thing?
Well, I think it's both. I mean, I feel like on one hand, it's our natural way of being human. So I sort of divide being psychic and being intuitive into two different things. I make a distinction, there. And being intuitive is everyone has it. And that's a feeling of, how we feel in our body, we get the creepy crawlies, or what we feel in our emotions, I have a good feeling or a bad feeling about something. And then the gut, I don't know why I know, I just know. And those three things make our intuition. And they're just almost like an extension of our instincts as animals, as people.
Right.
And I think that's everybody has it. Everybody has it. It's nothing really mystical in my mind about that. It's just part of our human nature. And I think we can develop it, we can enhance it if we pay attention to it, or we can ignore it, and that's, a problem. I'm sure everyone has a story about what happens when they ignore their intuition, and that we know that doesn't go well. And then psychic is a little different. Psychic is the ability to speak to spirit beings that they're not us. Your intuition is your own inner knowing. Psychic is we're really connecting to something outside of ourselves. And that requires sort of a more mystical viewpoint of the world. Maybe you're talking to dead relatives or angels or, the ascended masters like Jesus or Mary. Maybe you're speaking directly to God. I mean, every person that I've ever done a reading for has a team of these spirit guides around them, made up of all different kinds of beings. And that, if it didn't happen to me every day of my life, literally every day of my life, I might be skeptical about that myself, because I tend not to believe in things that actually don't happen to me personally. But I do think that that's that's something also that some people have a lot of talent for, and if you have a lot of talent for, like I did, it's probably because it's part of your life purpose in some way to use it. And everyone can also develop it. If JV, if you wanted to develop your psychic ability, you could, if you wanted to.
Well, I've heard others describe it as, or compare it to someone with musical abilities. Yeah. That's actually something that I do have. But some people have a greater natural ability than others, but everybody can benefit from learning and practicing and exercising these skills and improving them.
Sure. Yeah, and I think so. I think that's great. I love the musical ability analogy, or sometimes I think about like athletic ability. Like everyone's got some, and some people have more than others, and it depends on what your life purpose is. Like my life purpose is to be a healer and to train other psychics, healers, and empaths. So I have a lot of it, and I think like you can like if we go with the theory that our soul, in a way, our own spirit, our higher self, whatever you want to call it, is speaking to us through our intuition, it's very beneficial to learn how to listen to that. Because your soul, your higher self, always has the bigger plan for you, always has a better plan than your personality can come up with. And so if we want to live a really soulful life, and in a way reach our highest potential, it really benefits us to learn to listen to our intuition.
And one of the other things that you are very involved with, in fact, you are a master teacher, is Reiki. Tell us a little bit about Reiki.
So Reiki is a gentle, hands-on energy healing technique from Japan that teaches the practitioners learn how to move energy in the person they're working with, sort of like acupuncture without needles, and we learn to flow chi or energy through ourselves and also to the people we're working with. And, lately, I've been teaching Reiki for 20 years now. And back in the day, it was kind of fringy and, not that many people really understood what it was. And now it's really hitting the mainstream, especially here in Boston where I live. Like all of the big Boston City hospitals have Reiki units right in there. You can
the hospitals do?
Yeah, you can go to Dana-Farber, which is like the most famous cancer hospital probably in the country, and they have full-time Reiki staff that will come and give you Reiki while you're receiving your cancer treatments. It's used in hospitals, pre- and post-surgical. Like all of the hospitals here in Boston have full-time Reiki staff. You just call and they'll come down and do Reiki on you. So it's become more popular, more mainstream. And with that, there's sort of like a science base behind it. It's been researched to really improve things like depression, anxiety, pain. It's often used in chronic pain clinics because pain clinics are always looking for better ways to treat pain without narcotics, and it has kind of a proven track record now. It's gone from something that's just like strange and new agey and woo woo to it's used in Mass General Hospital, and Dana-Farber and all these big hospitals here in Boston. We have the best hospitals, some say, in the world, and it's big. It's big here.
So what are the types of ailments that someone may be suffering from that you would say are most appropriate to be addressed through Reiki?
I think that for me, the most common thing is depression and anxiety. I get a lot of people who want that. Chronic pain is also something that happens. And then I just sort of general, I'm not feeling well, or right now we're not really doing too much of it because of the COVID, although it can be done long distance. So I actually worked on a COVID person who was pretty full in the middle of it, doing long distance sessions, and she said, she has nothing to compare it to, but she said she thinks it helped her sleep at night and lower her fever and give her some peace of mind. It's very relaxing, Reiki. So it tends to bring about a relaxation response in the body. And when we're relaxed and stress-free, the body's own immunity and natural healing system kicks in. So we can heal on our own, too, when we're receiving Reiki and we're more relaxed.
So in a lot of ways, it's a catalyst to help your body use its own natural ability to heal.
That's right. So when we come out of stress, when we come out of depression, when we come out of anxiety, like our bodies are self-correcting. We're always, looking for that homeostasis. And when we kind of get the pain and the stress and the depression and tension out of the way, it opens up, blood flow. It opens up oxygen. It opens up, when we have those systems really flowing through us, when we have energy, literally chi, life force energy moving through us, then our body will correct itself to the best that it can.
So if I was suffering from any of this that we've been talking about, and I was lying in a bed or whatever and blindfolded, and I didn't know what was going on around me, and somebody came in and started doing Reiki with me, what would I feel? Well,
JV, I think that there's sort of two different experiences people have. people who are very sensitive to feeling energy will feel things like pulsing, heat, tingling, sort of like this resistance feeling, like the wrong ends of a magnet kind of resistance. Some people will feel those things, and people who are less sensitive to energy will just feel the results of the Reiki. So they're going to feel relaxed, happy. Many people fall asleep, Some people have emotional releases that they'll cry. I always say men fall asleep, but women cry when I do Reiki on them. And I think, we get what we need in that case. So some people will have, like, emotional responses, like they clear out an emotion that's in the way. But I think overall people feel relaxed, happy, like you've had a really, really good nap, but it's not exactly the same as sleeping. It's like a deeper so it takes you into, if you know anything about this brainwave states, it takes you to a theta state, which is where the deepest healing happens in our body.
Is that the same state as you achieve while you're sleeping?
When we sleep, we
different?
go through lots of different phases. So the beta brainwave is like when we're awake and fully conscious. Then we go into an alpha state, which is more like that's where intuition and psychic things happen, and where you're driving in a car, or you're washing the dishes, or you're walking the dog. You're highly creative and intuitive in the alpha state. Then the theta state is like more of a non-waking state. You're pretty sleepy, you're deep meditation, or you're sleeping. And then there's the lowest state, the delta state, which is low, lights out, like bye-bye. And as we sleep, we float through cycles of all of those brainwaves, and this Reiki will put us into the most healing one, which is the theta.
If you're just joining us, we're talking with Lisa Campion tonight, psychic counselor, Reiki master teacher. Her website is her name, Lisa Campion. It's like champion without the H, campion.com, and you'll find a lot of information about her and her work there. We're going to get to talking about energy vampires in a little bit. We've got a long conversation with Lisa, so we've got a lot of time to cover topics. And I want to know about your experience, Lisa. Were you a client, if you will, of Reiki before you became someone who practices and then teaches it, or how were you introduced to it?
Yeah, I had a session, and I think, when I started doing psychic work, I was really young. I started when I was 19. It's crazy to think about. I think that, wow, that's amazing. Like, why did I think I could do that? But I just did. I just started to work as a psychic, and then after a few years into that, I studied counseling and psychology because I wanted to more deeply help people and do more than just deliver the message. I wanted to help people work through their stuff at a deeper level. And then many years go by, and I combined those two things together, and I started seeing, like, this over 20 years ago, I started seeing really energy inside people's body. I started being curious about what was happening inside their body and what was happening inside their energy field. And so I was looking for a way to access that, to understand that. And one of my friends said, well, why don't you try some energy medicine? Why don't you try something like Reiki? And so I did, and I received a session, and I just sort of fell in love with it and studied it, went through all the levels of it, and then started teaching it right away. And I've been teaching it and writing about it now for the past 20 years.
And as you got better at it or better understood it better, are you able to focus that energy more intensely than someone who's just starting out?
I think so, yeah. So Reiki works with, I sometimes think of it as like light coming through a prism, So the light is very pure, but it has to run through the practitioner's energy field. And as we do more and more work on ourselves. Psychics call it clearing the channel. When you get your own personal stuff out of the way, you become a clearer channel. And I think that's also true for Reiki, and because I just have a lot of practice. Like I've been doing, 15, 20 sessions a week for the past 20 years.
Oh, wow.
So I have, have had my hands on a lot of people that way and run a lot of energy and done, I think my publisher made me count how many sessions I've done. It was something like 15,000 sessions.
Wow.
I know. I couldn't believe it. And I was like, dang, so after all that time, it's just like my norm. Like if you did something for that long, you would have kind of a mastery of it and really feel in a different way than somebody who's just starting.
When you're working with someone's energy, whether it's Reiki or in another fashion, can you feel if they have a negative energy? Some people have negative energy.
Yeah, I can. And I usually kind of break it down into two basic things, JV. So a lot of people have trauma. Everybody really does. So sometimes the negative energy that I feel in people is just the trauma, the painful, difficult things that they've been through that that creates incredible blocks in our energy field. It creates like emotional pain, physical pain. And I would say it's so common. And that's the most common form of negativity. I don't even think of it as negativity because I feel a lot of compassion, for people that have trauma, which is basically everyone as far as I can tell. And so I feel that, and I'm like, well, that's my job as a healer, is to step into that and be of service, to be helpful, to feel compassion, to show up for somebody in that state. And when we do that, no matter what modality we're using, people get better. People heal, right? And the other kind of negativity is more like spiritual negativity, and that's like when we start talking about entities or negative spirit attachments and creepy, crawly things. And it's also quite common. I see it pretty frequently, and I think they're connected. So if you have a person who have had a lot of trauma and have been like living kind of a hard life, you may be more susceptible to negative spiritual energy. And as we take care of both of them, like maybe we take some entities off of you, and then you start healing and going to therapy and seeing a Reiki practitioner and living a cleaner life, then your trauma gets better and your overall energy lightens up. You like, we call it raising your frequency. You raise your frequency, and then you don't have so much of that stuff anymore.
Tell me about the Institute of Energy Medicine.
Yeah, I work in a energy medicine school, and I have been doing that for the past 15 years with my business partner, Reese Thomas. And we train. It's a 3-year energy medicine school. People come from all over the world, actually, to study with us. And we train people how to do energy medicine at a much more in-depth level than what we can learn in Reiki. And, it's really fantastic transformational work. Like, we go really deep into clearing the channel, like clearing out people's stuff and healing their own wounds, because as a healer, you can really only go with your client as deep as you've gone inside yourself. And that's what makes, I think, healing work different from, like having an office job. It doesn't require you to do like a whole bunch of personal growth, which being a healer really does. So it's really great. I hope anyone who's interested in training to be a healer, studying energy medicine is a great way to do it.
How long have you been doing this with the Institute?
15 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
And time flies when you're having fun, right?
I know.
We are talking tonight with Lisa Campion, and again, her website is her name, lisacampion.com. She's a psychic counselor and a Reiki master teacher. We've talked about Reiki and your teaching of it. As a psychic counselor, do you also teach people how to harness and maybe better use their psychic abilities?
Yeah, I love to do that. I teach psychic development, and right now all my classes are online, which is kind of fun too. So I love training psychics, and I have a bunch of different levels of trainings: beginner training, intermediate training, and really actually advanced training. And I just think that's so fun to take people on that journey and help them understand which of their gifts are open, like which of their channels, which of their clairs, if you want to call it that, are open, how to access it, how to, it's a different sort of muscle in the brain than most of us use. We need to learn how to think symbolically, and most of us think kind of analytically. But the psychic world is a lot about symbols, and it's like a whole different language. And I love training people how to do that. I mean, I feel like the world needs all the healers it can get. So as many psychics, healers, energy medicine practitioners, Reiki people as we can have in the world, like now more than ever, don't you think? Like the world needs all the healers it can get, and that's what I love to do.
If the body of healers increases, the number of people that actually know how to use this energy and employ it, does that raise the greater good of all of the population? I mean, is this an energy that affects everybody, regardless of whether you're focusing on healing an individual or not?
I think so. As people wake up their psychic, have these, become more intuitive, become more sensitive, or feel a calling to become a healer and really pursue that. And that might be like maybe you're studying yoga and you're really, going down that pathway, or maybe you're a meditator. I always say yoga, Reiki, and meditation are like the three gateways into a larger spiritual world. And people are, I think, really turned on to all that stuff right now. And as we do that, the consciousness of the planet gets more. Like, as more people turn to those things, as more people take a broader view, open their minds, connect to their spiritual self in the spiritual world, we increase the number of people on the planet that are awake, and conscious and on that spiritual journey. And that's just incredibly beneficial, I think, for everybody.
Let's talk about the soul. Tell me about the soul. What is it? Where does it come from?
Such an interesting question, and I can only give you, like, my current theory. Like, I'm not going to tell you, for sure, like, I don't have a dogma about it, really, but a theory, and I often change my theory as I grow and evolve in my own understanding of things. But I feel like the soul is it's like your core self, like the essence of you that doesn't change if we're going to say that we believe in past lifetimes, that your core self doesn't change between your lifetimes. It's on this journey. It has a journey of evolution and evolvement and awakening that it's going on. And our cycle of incarnation, all of the lifetimes that we live, are like a school. Like Earth is like a school that we go to learn. I think compassion and empathy is one of the, and strength and love. We have this kind of curriculum that we're learning down here on planet Earth, and that our the journey of the soul is the journey of our evolution. Eventually, we complete school and maybe we go back to oneness with God. That's enlightenment, right? And as a psychic, my specialty is looking at the level of the soul. So interesting to me, to look at who you are, JV, as a soul. We might look at your past lives and see themes and see you've been working through this or that for a long time, and we'll look at the contracts with the people in your life, with your family or your spouse or your kids, your soulmates, your soul family. We might look at your life purpose and really, because that's a soul issue, what are you here to contribute? And you are, a fantastic contributor to the world. So how is that going? And we might look at where are you blocked that you could open up, or what you're awesome, really awesome at. And then we might look at where you're going in the future, because the soul has this story, this narrative that I like to tune into, and I just think it's the most interesting thing to know about somebody. It's the nature of their soul. And
I think I'm quoting off of your website now. You say that the soul holds your core essence.
Yes.
Is it real? Is what we are, is everything that we are, despite the fact that we have a human form or a physical form as we're here on Earth, but everything else that makes us us, is that our soul?
I think so, yeah. And I always see two aspects of people. So there's the soul aspect of you, which is this core aspect, and then there's your personality, and your personal self. And spiritual teachers have been talking about this for a long time. The Buddhists talk about big mind and small mind, or the superconscious and the ego. It has a lot of different words. And many people, especially old soul people, have a lot of congruence between their personality and their soul. So they match, And other people have arguments going on between their soul and their personality. Their soul has a bigger mission for them, and the personality throws a fit or kicks and screams. Our personalities are kind of, lazy, or pleasure-seeking. They want a nice, easy, cushy life.
Our personalities do?
I want that. You want that, right?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true, yeah.
Yeah, and then your soul doesn't really care about that. Your soul wants you to grow. Your soul wants you to evolve. And who wins that battle, JV? Most of the time.
Yeah, well, I wish my soul would make more of the decisions because.
Well, you can if you listen to your intuition.
It seems to be a little smarter based on the way you're describing it.
Yeah, your soul, but it's hard because your soul will push you out of your comfort zone every single time. And our personality, maybe our personality is getting sick of it now, but mostly our personality wants to sit on the couch and drink beer and eat popcorn and watch Netflix.
There must be a camera on me every night because you just described my life. Kidding.
Well, me too. But that's what our personality wants. But your soul is much bigger plan for you. you know?
Is the soul, is it eternal, and is it static? Is our soul the same soul from start to finish?
I think the soul is evolving, so it's not really static. The whole point is for the soul to evolve to its like highest form, you know, like it's learning, it's growing, it's evolving. So definitely not static. It's always growing. And yes, as far as I can tell, eternal. I mean, when I get to the other end of eternity, JV, I'll let you know, like, you know, whether that's true or not. But that's the theory that I'm going with right now: eternal and ever changing and evolving.
And I got to ask you this, just because most of us have an understanding of soul from whatever religion we were brought up with. Is the soul a religious thing, as we understand religion?
I think many religions have their own way of trying to understand that, trying to explain that, and I don't know if any of them are wrong. You know, like everybody, and I think if you're spiritual and you're comfortable with your religious framework, your religious context, it's perfectly fine to find a theory or story that fits inside of a religious context. Or a philosophical context, so we kind of need that. Like the soul is ineffable. It's mysterious, you know. So we need things like scripture or religion or spirituality or meditation or spiritual teachers to help us look at this part of ourselves, to help us grow, because our personality just kind of scratches its head and goes, I don't know, I don't understand that. Like what, you know? What is that? What do you want me to do? What, you know? And we need a deeper, broader framework to understand something that's so much bigger than our personal self.
Another thing that I noticed on your website that I wanted to ask you about, and you work with a lot of people from a lot of different perspectives, but one of the things you say is that you especially enjoy clients who are at a crossroads. Tell me about that.
Yeah, I have basically two sets of people seem to come to me, and I enjoy both of them. One of them are people who feel stuck in their life. You know, like they're not able to move forward. They know they have some like incredible potential. They can't find it. They don't know what their life purpose is, or they're just sort of stuck on the hamster wheel of life. And you know, doing soul work at that point can be really helpful. If we could pull your soul down here in the room and talk to it for an hour, like how would that help you move forward in your life in some way? And the other group of clients that I have are people that are in the middle of a crisis. I would say I love a good crisis because people are very motivated to change. They're very like cracked open. They're very, in a crisis, the energy is moving, and with a glimpse of your soul or a conversation with your soul at the point of a transition or a crisis, we can really make a choice because, you know, that's where the choice points are. That's where the crossroads are. And both of those things are really, really good times to do work.
We are going to change the topic now and talk about energy vampires. And I think a lot of what we just talked about kind of sets this up anyway, because if my understanding is correct, and you will explain this for us, however, but much of what an energy vampire preys on are the things we just got done talking about. So firstly, what is an energy vampire?
Well, I think it's a category or a couple of different categories of people who don't know how to get energy of their own. You know, they don't know how to fill up their energy, so they've learned sort of an unfortunate habit of taking energy from other people, of stealing energy from other people. And most people, when I say energy vampires, they go, oh my God, I know one, or oh, that's my mother-in-law, oh my God, yes, I was married to one. We have this sort of intrinsic knowing of what it feels like when we're around people who just like drain you. Like, if you feel sucked dry or exhausted after you hung around somebody, you're probably dealing with an energy vampire. And, it's not, they're certainly around. And I think the more sensitive we are, the more we start to wake up to this whole world of soul and energy, we become, and especially if you're an empath, like a very sensitive type. Because I think empaths and energy vampires are often come into, a little dance with each other. They're like two ends of a polarity that often get drawn to each other. So, as people are waking up to their empathic spiritual natures, we have to kind of deal with this topic.
Can energy vampires affect us if we're just in the same room with them, or do they have to be focusing on us specifically? Does there have to be a conversation, some type of interaction? I
think the more connected you are to an energy vampire, the more you're going to go down. I do think there are some, like, maybe casual encounters, like, you sit next to somebody on the bus or something who's in a really bad place, and if you're very sensitive and psychic, you're going to feel that person draining you. But I think what's more common is like a deeper relationship, like it's your partner, it's your boss, it's your parent, or your kid, even. When we have like a longer term relationship with that person, that's where things really can kind of get pretty serious. Like, you can really get into trouble.
So, from what I just heard you say, it seems as though energy vampires have a multiplied effect on people if they are close to you in some way, or have some type of relationship with you that actually affects you in a personal way, like you said, like a spouse or a child or a boss who actually, a coworker who actually affects your work life. That is a multiplier of this energy.
Absolutely, and the more you hang around and the deeper in you are with them, the tougher it is on you. And I think there's also a couple of different kinds of energy vampires. So there's the worst kind, which is also, fortunately, the least common kind, is what I call the predatory energy vampire. And those are people that are really, like, kind of psychopathic. They're like the con men and women of the world. They target somebody on purpose to drain them on purpose, and they really don't care. They see people. So there's a lot of conversation now around narcissists, and people who are of narcissistic personality disorder, or psychopathic personality disorder, and they really will attach onto a vulnerable person, and usually an empath, who that person is then called their narcissistic supply. It's like a battery. That person's like a battery, and they will, with intention, drain, your money, your time, the food out of your fridge, the gas in your car, your attention, any resource you have, they're going to take it, and rather remorselessly. Like, they don't feel too bad about it. They feel like it's their right, and they have a lot of often disdain for the people that they drain. Like, well, you're stupid for letting me do that. And when you finally set a boundary and say no, they just move on without remorse, really. Like, well, that's, drain that battery, I'm on to the next one, see you later, And unfortunately, we don't have too many of those around, but they are really, they'll really take a bite out of you. Like, I've seen people get sick, have, a nervous breakdown, have a life breakdown, when they've had a really close encounter with one of those types.
Wow.
Yeah.
How do we know if we're encountering one of them? I mean, often we have these feelings. We feel the things you've just described, but in many cases we come up with excuses as to why we feel this way. We didn't eat well yesterday, or we didn't sleep well, or we didn't, whatever. But it could be one of these encounters, and how can we identify it?
Well, with this predatory kind, they're really slippery because they're incredibly good actors. A con man or a con person is they're shapeshifters. They are actors. They'll morph into, they tend to be incredibly charming, charismatic, attractive. They really are that's how vampires are, right?
Yeah.
Vampires are attractive, and they're predatory, and they're parasitic. And they kind of set the hook and then drain you. So in the beginning, there's usually this honeymoon period where you're like, oh, my God, it's the best relationship I've ever had. And this person is fantastic, and I'm so lucky to have them, until somewhere along the line, after they sort of set the hook, they just start draining you. And there are physical sensations, too, JV, that people have. So, a lot of times when you're around somebody who's going to drain you, you'll feel like uncomfortable in your solar plexus, and you'll cross your arms over your belly. When that person's around. Some people tell me they get an occipital headache, the back of their head will hurt. You might have nightmares about that person, actually, or kind of a feeling of dread when you have to see them. Some people will feel so tired, exhausted when that person leaves, you've got to lie down and take a nap. So those are kind of those are the symptoms you might feel. And then eventually, it's going to go badly for you. Eventually, those things rack up. You have no money. They've taken your credit cards. They've, they've kind of like wiped you out of all of the resources in your life, and it's to the point where that it's impossible to miss that's going on.
And these are predatory.
Predatory, yeah, they purposeful.
And I'm assuming a crucifix doesn't scare them away.
No, yeah, you can't throw garlic at them, or shoot them with a silver bullet, or throw holy water on them. They're not unholy.
Right.
They're not like that. They're just like they just don't know another way to access energy for themselves. That's their way, just like a vampire. That's what vampires do. They literally feed off blood, which is the life force of other people. But that's the rarest kind. There's a much more common kind that I call the needy energy vampire, and they're not predatory. They're just people who are often have had very legitimate difficult things that have happened to them, and they kind of have unconscious. They're more usually unconscious about the fact that they're taking energy from you, and they just have learned how to use whatever bad thing has happened to them, like their victim story, their problem, as a way to get attention. Like, if you've ever met somebody who's really, really, really needy in some way, or helpless, or, often they have a real thing, but they're kind of milking it for the attention they get, or the care that they get, or the help that they get from other people. And that's more common. It's a little easier to deal with. We have to learn how to set a boundary. If you run into a predatory vampire, there's no reforming them. There's no changing them. You really just have to get away from them. You just have to cut your losses and run away. With a needy vampire, we can often we have to negotiate, or we set boundaries. You decide maybe how much time you're going to put into that person, or what your boundary is going to be, so that you don't always have to cut them out of your life, but you do have to, because it's just like they'll take and take and take and take until you don't have anything left.
I mean, it's difficult to cut and run if that energy, or that vampire, the predatory one particularly, is your child. I mean, how do you do that?
Oh, yeah.
You can't,
I don't know. Sometimes it's really, really, really difficult, and people like that, especially with a child, it's even easier to cut. I mean, sometimes when we have, like if you were in an extremely abusive relationship, because that's basically what it boils down to eventually, you have to decide when you're ready to, when you're ready and under what circumstances you're going to cut that relationship out. And sometimes it's so hard or even impossible to do it. And then we can practice some psychic self-defense techniques, of really working on holding a boundary, holding an energetic, working on your energy field and having a stronger bubble. There are other things you can do when you're around people you can't get away from that are taking your energy.
We talked about predatory. We talked about, I can't remember the second one. Needy. Are there any other types?
Yeah, there's one that I call the situational energy vampire. We might have a lot of those around right now, actually. And the situational is kind of like when bad things happen to good people, anyone can fall into an energy vampire pattern. If you really got down on your luck, maybe you've had some points in your life, where you were just at your wit's end. Maybe you have a physical, a health diagnosis, you lost your job. You're, stuck in lockdown during COVID and you lost your job. We have hard moments in life where we don't have any resources and we become very empty, we become very needy. And that's called situational energy vampire. And I've been there, you've been there, probably everyone who's listening has had a time when they're like, wow, they just don't have anything and they need. And we have to be careful around how we manage our energy. If you're in that situation where you're calling your friends all the time, or you need to borrow money, or you're can I bum a ride somewhere, or you're just at your wit's end, so you're calling your friends at all hours of the night and freaking out, And of course, we all go through that. There's nothing wrong with that. Those things pass, and when they pass, we really want to aim for sort of a 50-50 relationship with the people in our lives. And if you've been on a downward spiral and you're coming out of it, we want to put energy back. It's like a bank account, with our relationships. And if you've made a lot of deposits, you're gonna, if you've made a lot of withdrawals, you're gonna make some deposits to kind of even it out. And over time, if our energetic bank balance with somebody is more or less even over time, that's a really, really comfortable relationship with somebody. But if you have somebody that's always taking and never giving, that's really the definition of an energy vampire.
So going back to the predatory type, is this something they need to survive? If they don't get this energy, would they literally, I mean, may not physically die, but emotionally die maybe?
Yeah, I think I think they just don't have any way to make it on their own in a way. So they have to just have somebody else's attention. And you can, if you study narcissists and narcissistic behavior or psychopathic behavior, they see people as, there's sort of like a lack of self, like they don't have like a great sense of their own self. So they have people around them who are feeding them the right image of themselves, or who are like literally giving them their life force energy. That's the scary thing for me about it. And I had a client like many years ago, like maybe 10 years ago, really sweet lady, and she was really sick, and the doctors couldn't find anything that was wrong with her. They couldn't figure out what was going on. Sick, depressed, she had like chronic fatigue symptoms. She was like anemic, and I would do a Reiki session with her, and she would feel better, kind of pump her up. She was working hard on healing herself. And then I would see her again in a few weeks, and she would look terrible again. I was like, wow, what's going on, And then one day, her spouse, her husband, came to pick her up at the office, and he looked like 10 years younger. I knew they were the same age, and he had this like glow about him. He was like, like as tired and old as she looked, he looked like in the bloom of health, Mm-hmm. And when I was looking at them, I could see this like energy cord that connected them that looked like a straw, like literally like a straw that you suck through. And I was like, wow, he is totally sucking her energy, and that's why he looks like he's in the pink of health and she looks terrible. And eventually she, and it was not a very healthy relationship. It was a pretty dysfunctional relationship in every way. And eventually she was able to split with him. And after they divorced, she perked right up. Her health
Really?
came back. She looked 10 years younger. She had sort of this new lease on life after she got rid of that person and he was remarried within like months, or reconnected with somebody within months, and he kind of had this like, oh well, like whatever, kind of, I guess we're done, we're done here. I got somebody new. And then that new person went into that same kind of decline.
Really?
Yeah. And that's when I was like, what is going on here? Like, what is that? And that was before anyone was talking about energy vampires or really even narcissists. And it was the first time I really was like, that's what that is. That person's a vampire.
When we use the word vampire, we often think of something evil. Is there anything evil about this? Other than maybe the effects of it, I
don't know, JV. That's sort of an interesting question. Like, can we say somebody who's psychopathic and or somebody who has narcissistic tendencies, are they evil?
Right.
I guess it depends on your definition of evil. And is a shark evil because it eats you, or is a shark just being a shark?
Right.
I don't know. I'm not sure. Like, that's sort of a deeper philosophical question. We could ask some theologians, some philosophers, and some psychologists about that. Like, is it evil if you can't help it? Is it evil, or is it actually many people who've been connected with those people will say they feel like it's evil, like those people have a darkness about them, and that darkness would be lack of empathy. So the very definition of a narcissist or a psychopath is they don't have empathy for other people.
So do empaths or people that are very sensitive like yourself, do you act like a magnet for these people, for vampires?
100%.
Really?
Yeah. Because we have like two soft boundaries. We don't really, we're not really great at boundaries. These big, spongy, porous energy fields. We're born healers. We have big, generous hearts. We really care. And a lot of times there's like empaths have like a little bit of naive. Like we never see it coming. We can't believe anybody would be that way because we just don't have a bone in our body like that. You know what I mean? And I think I've seen a lot of times empaths who will try to reform their energy vampire partner. Well, they don't really mean it, or if I really just love them enough, they'll finally be healed, and then they'll be okay, And I just very rarely do I actually see that. With the predatory vampires, really never. Some of the other types of vampires can be reformed if they really want to, but those predatory ones, it's just like the way they are.
And is it deliberate? I mean, we kind of asked this, but maybe not as directly. Is it deliberate? Are they aware of what they're doing, and do they have any guilt from it?
I think that it is deliberate with the predatory kind, and I don't think they have any guilt because they basically don't have any empathy. In fact, I feel like not only do they not feel guilt, but they'll actually feel even disdain. Like, well, if you're stupid enough to fall for that, well, you deserve all you get. Like that. It's hard. It's pretty harsh. And then the needy ones, vampires are usually much more unconscious. That they don't. Sometimes they're horrified when they find out that that's what they're doing. They're like, oh my God, I'm an energy vampire, and they're like truly like horrified and shocked. They may be more willing to find another way to be. And then sometimes, this is a really tricky part, JV, is that sometimes empaths and sensitive like myself, if we let ourselves get too drained, we can become an energy vampire too.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. So think about how vampires are made. Like, a Hollywood vampire, finds like a sensitive, willing victim. They suck all the life out of them until that person now becomes a vampire. And that happens a lot in the empath work that I do. And I do a lot of workshops, and my new book is coming out later this year called Energy Healing for Empaths. And in that book, and in the work that I do with empaths, I've run across many of them who have gotten so drained by other people that they're now pretty vampy. they're the biggest vampire in the room, and they don't know. They're horrified. They're kind of pointing the finger at the other energy vampires and saying, oh my God, this vampire drained the life out of me, but they don't know that they've become now a problem.
Is there a way, since we can't necessarily identify these people in advance, maybe we can figure out what and who they are after they've already started their process, but is there a way to protect yourself from these vampires?
I think it's really about watching how you feel around somebody. So, for example, if you feel that feeling of dread, if you feel that tugging in your solar plexus, or you feel like you want to cover your solar plexus, if you have that occipital headache, and then if you start feeling resentful, that resentment is a big flag that there's an imbalance in the energy between people. So that's a sign that you're giving or get more than you're getting in that relationship consistently. So you could almost do a little inventory in your life and write down all of the things or all the people in your life that make you feel that feeling of resentment. And if you're like, wow, that person constantly makes me feel resentment, I wish I could avoid them. I don't feel like picking up the phone when they call. I'm like, oh my God, what do they want now? That's a dead giveaway that you need to manage the energy in that relationship better. And this is a hard thing for sensitives to hear, and maybe for anyone to hear, but it's on us to manage our own energy. It's on us to set our boundaries. Nobody can do it for you. Nobody will do it for you. In fact, the entire world is happy if you have terrible boundaries and overgive all the time. No one's going to stop you from doing it. So we have to empower ourselves, especially as sensitives. We have to take control of our yeses and nos and decide what we're going to say yes and no to. And anything in your life that's making you consistently feel resentful, you got to start saying no.
We're talking tonight with Lisa Campion. Her website is her name, lisacampion.com. Lisa's a psychic counselor and a Reiki master teacher. The Art of Psychic Reiki is a book that you've had that out for a little while. I think when you came on the program the first time, Lisa, we talked about that book, and then you've got a new one coming out, right?
Yeah. The other one, The Art of Psychic Reiki, has been out for a year and a half. It's doing quite well. It's still on the bestseller list. Just got translated into Spanish, which is kind of exciting.
Well, that's cool.
Yeah, that's cool. And then the new one is called Energy Healing for Empaths, and that won't be out until February. But it's really actually the topic that we're talking about now. So what are energy? There's a whole lot in there about energy vampires. How do we deal with them? How do we manage our energy if we're sensitive and empathic types? And how do we live in our gift in a way? How do we step into the good part of it so that we can like the fact that we're an empath instead of wishing we weren't?
Lisa, are we always equally vulnerable, or are there times when we are more vulnerable to energy vampires than other times? Are there certain, like, are we vulnerable when we sleep? Where are we most vulnerable, and where are we least vulnerable?
We're really vulnerable when we sleep. It's so interesting that you said that, JV. That's a big part, especially for psychic vampires, which would be a good thing. We haven't talked about that. Yeah, it'd be fun to talk about that. When somebody's like psychically connecting with you and sucking your energy. We're vulnerable when we're really tired and we're not in a good place ourselves, and we're actually the most vulnerable in our physical and intimate relationships with people. So the whole way that our sexual lives and our sexual relationships work open us in an incredibly powerful way to having our energy drained. So you have to be very careful about who you engage with that way if you're sensitive, because it's the easiest way for somebody to drain you.
Really?
Yeah.
And is it the same effect? Or you have the same effects from
like
that?
Worse.
Really,
it's
it's worse.
Really like faster, harder, stronger. Like you really like you're deeply exchanging energy. We deeply exchange energy with our lovers, and if you have a lover that loves you and honors you and reveres you and has your best interest at heart, it's really obviously beautiful and nurturing and can give you energy. And if you have somebody who doesn't have a good intention towards you or a good feeling towards you, or who is actually has the intention of taking your energy, it's so dangerous. It can be so dangerous. It can be so bad. And I think it's, especially young people these days have a very kind of cavalier attitude, casual attitude about their lovers, and don't always, I think about that. And especially if you're sensitive, you got to be thinking about that.
Let's say you have a relationship like that has that effect, and you end the relationship. In most cases, there's still an emotional connection with a relationship that's over or that has ended in some fashion. Does that emotional connection mean that vampiric connection will continue to exist?
Yes. And that connection, so especially with our sexual partners, we form energy cords. We form energy cords in all of our relationships, but they're particularly strong in our romantic relationships. And those energy cords, an energy cord isn't something that you're going to take to your doctor and your doctor's going to see it. It's like a part of our energy field, and like as a psychic I can see it. But we often feel them or experience them even though we can't see them always ourselves. And that romantic connection with somebody can form a very thick energy cord between people. And even when the relationship is over, that if you have an energy vampire on the other end of it, they can continue to drain you even though they're not with you anymore, even though you broke up. And also, if you have especially the predatory ones tend to be pretty psychic themselves. They have this really uncanny ability to figure out what you need and they kind of get in your head in a way. And I'll see an energy cord between somebody's third eye, your brow chakra, to an energy vampire's brow chakra, and that's a psychic vampire, and they will drain you while you're sleeping. They'll come in your dreams and attack you or stalk you, or it's kind of rare, but it's bad when it happens. So if you have one that you're dreaming about, or that you feel like is sort of psychically stalking you, that should be something that you take care of right away.
So yeah, how do you clean those relationships up?
Well, there's a lot of ways to do it. You can come, to a Reiki practitioner, an energy healer, a shaman, psychic, who is going to help you, clear the cords. You can do cord clearing meditations on your own, and there's all kinds of information. You can look it up and see how to do that. But in one of these really entrenched relationships, we often need help. Maybe a therapist or some kind of, counselor would also help you. So a lot of times we have to clean up the unresolved aspects of the relationship. So you might have to feel, grieve or cry, or you have to maybe forgive, or work through anger and hurts, So a lot of times these cords happen because they happen a lot in relationships where we don't get to finish things. We don't get closure in the relationship. When we storm off and we don't have that conversations that we need to close the relationship, that's where the cords are the strongest. You know? That makes sense, right? Like,
yeah.
Yeah. So, and then anything you can do to put closure in the relationship. I do this, what I call the 7-day letter writing cure, where you write a letter. You're not going to send the letter, but every night you write a letter. And because I think we can get closure by getting things off our chest. We didn't say everything we needed to say. And even if we did say it, maybe the person couldn't hear us, because that often happens. So you write a letter, you never show anyone the letters, and maybe there's a few days of really angry letters, and there's a few days of really hurt letters. And then when we get through that, we get to the soul-to-soul. We were talking about the soul earlier, you know. We get to the soul-to-soul level between us and our former partner, and we can say things like, okay, well, that sucks, but I grew a lot, and I'm grateful for the experience, you know, and I wish you well, and, you know, whatever we have to say. And that process right there can close a cord, can cut the cord with somebody. And sometimes, you know, there's sort of like an energetic piece where we have to do it. We really have to take the cord out, but we also have to do the emotional piece too.
Let's reverse this a little bit. What about if we may suspect that we ourselves are an energy vampire? What do we do then?
Wow, such a great question. I think it's, and I've had that in the courses, in the workshops that I teach. I've had people come up to me and say, oh, my God, I think I'm an energy vampire. What do I do? And I say, well, you know, good for you for knowing that, good for you for recognizing it. And the first thing that you've got to do is figure out how to fill yourself, you know, figure out how to fill your own energy tanks. And that's not something that we really know how to do. You know, sometimes energy vampires really need to learn empathy. So they need to learn how to put themselves in other people's shoes and learn compassion and empathy. But oftentimes it's a matter of learning, like, literally how to fill your battery from something besides another person, you know, and that, I think it's different for everybody, like, what fills you. And you can think about what drains you and what fills you. What do you feel good after you do it? For some people, it's creative pursuits. You know, you're a musician. I bet music fills you. Making music, listening to music, fills your energy tank, right?
Right, that's right.
So artists often have that. Creative people have that. For some people, it's about being in nature. Other people, it's a play. So playing, you know, whatever you play. I like ballroom dancing, you know. So I do ballroom dancing, and it fills me. Like, I feel great at the end of it. And those kinds of things, like our relationships, our healthy relationship, playing with your kids, walking your dog, you know, having a nap, eating good, healthy food, you know what I mean? Being out in the sunshine. Sunshine is actually incredibly powerful at filling us. I think that's why we crave sunshine. Especially, you know, in the darker climates where some of us live. So once you understand, like, you don't expect your car to drive with no gas in the tank, right?
Right, it wouldn't work.
No, you put gas in the tank, and it's not a mystery. But we often push ourselves as if we don't have to do that, right?
Driving on fumes, you mean?
Yeah. I mean, we all do it.
We all do it, yes.
We all do it. We have families, we have jobs, we have responsibilities. We don't have time to put gas in our own tank.
It's a pain in the neck.
Right. Who has time for that? We've got stuff to do, right? But if we don't do it, we run a risk of becoming an energy vampire. So I feel like it's critical. And if, you know, we get sick, we get depressed, we get anxious, you know, we have health problems too. So I'm sort of hoping to reform, and that's been one of the interesting things about this whole pandemic time, is that as scary and weird and strange as it's been, there's also been this kind of opportunity to put some gas in the tank. You know, like, take a nap and walk the dog and watch the grass grow.
I think that's
you know what I mean. Watch your hair grow.
Yeah, a lot of people are trying to suggest that, and not in the terms that we're suggesting it, but they're using different words to suggest the same thing, which is take this time to rediscover the value of some of these things. Right.
Exactly.
You know, and you mentioned music. I just have to say this, just because I'm getting such a kick out of it. I do go to music, whether I'm playing or listening, to recharge personally. And I've actually just rediscovered the magic of vinyl. And I have a turntable set up, and I've been playing records, and I'm getting such a great enjoyment out of doing it this way, as opposed to clicking on whatever and listening to music. I'm actually putting needles on records, and I'm really, really enjoying it. Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. They say vinyl has a warmer sound, And that's all I had we didn't have the other stuff when I grew up, so it sounds normal. It sounds good to me too, and I get it. But I love that you found something that is so exciting for you, or so enlivening, so fun, and that we really in our culture, especially as Americans, really don't see any value in having fun. And it's so sad because I feel like your soul wants to have fun, your soul wants to play. Your soul wants to have, kind of roll around in the healthy pleasure of being alive, and any healthy pleasure is very filling to our souls. And we're all sort of, as Americans, uptight and overworked and repressed and, tangled up. And that's not good for I think that's a big part of why we run into this problem of the energy vampire.
Tell me about your website for people. If they go to lisacampion.com, what are they going to find? I've
got a lot of free resources. In fact, if you go right now, I have this fantastic, if you sign up for my newsletter, it's a fantastic free gift, which will give you a 4-hour free video training on how to manage your energy if you're an empath. It's called Energy Management for Empaths. So come on over if you want to get the skinny on how to do that. I have a lot of free resources available. I have a page on my website called Free Resources, and it's just full of articles and interviews and all the stuff that I give away because I really love to help people. You can book a session with me if you want to work with me. I do phone and Zoom and Skype now, and I have classes all the time. All different levels of psychic development classes available.
And is there any difference in doing a session with somebody if you're using Zoom or Skype or something versus, I don't know, I mean, I imagine you were doing readings or consultations in many different forms even before this COVID thing. So that's not uncommon anymore. But is there any difference with that between being with you in person?
I'll always have just like you have a soft spot for vinyl, I have a soft spot for working with people in person. And my office is in Central Mass in Hopkinton, Massachusetts, but hopefully I'll be opening it up soon. And because I do like to work, get my hands on people and do hands-on energy work, it's like vinyl for me. I don't know what to say, but Zoom is so good, and I find that even more than a phone session, I can do pretty much the same thing. I'll still do energy work. I'll still do the whole thing on Zoom, which has really been kind of a miracle.
Yeah.
So I haven't minded it at all, really.
That's great, and the technology is very, very helpful.
Yeah.
Lisa, we're out of time. It's been a real pleasure having you back on the show, and I love talking about this stuff. I find it fascinating and very, very informative. When did you say the new book was going to be out next year?
February.
And that basically covers much of what we talked about here tonight. Yeah,
that's going to be a lot of what we talked about. It's coming out, my publisher's New Harbinger, and it'll be February 2021 that hits.
And that's called Energy Healing for Empaths? Is that right?
Yep.
Okay, terrific. Yep. Well, great. Again, thanks for being here. I cannot wait to have you back. When that book comes out, or when it gets close to, we'll definitely have to have you back on the show.
Thank you, JV. I would love to.
Beyond Reality Paranormal is hosted by J.V. Johnson and produced by Orion Palmer and Slick Eddie Edwards. Like us on Facebook and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Please consider supporting the program either through your podcast platform, click on the link in the description, or on Patreon at Joha Productions. If you'd like to be a guest on Beyond Reality Paranormal, or you have a recommendation for a guest, contact our producer, Slick Eddie Edwards. Eddie is spelled with a Y at slickeddieedwards@gmail.com.